When a disturbing cry echoed, the black maid found an incredible secret that left her shocked. Clara froze, her heart pounding beyond control at the unsettling sound that reverberated through the silence of the sprawling estate. The cry pierced through each layer of dust she meticulously wiped off the ornate shelves, a reminder that beneath the surface of opulent decor lay unseen struggles. Was it the wind? A creaking floor? Or something more profound lurking in the shadows? Each day, she fought against the way the family regarded her, often feeling like a mere accessory in their lavish life. As she tossed the dust rag aside, Clara wrestled with the familiar push and pull of yearning. She longed for her own voice, to be seen beyond the confines of her maid's uniform. Ink and paper filled her dream stories, born from the pain and love woven through her ancestry that was often overlooked. Yet, the weight of expectation suffocated her spirit. After nearly 2 decades of dedicated service to the Whitmans, the family's perceptions shadowed her every aspiration. Would they ever see her as something more than a caretaker? Just then, the cry echoed again, raw and haunting. It beckoned her, an inexplicable urge igniting her curiosity wrapped in trepidation. She hesitated, her heart racing. The attic was a place of secrets, the thin barrier between her reality and the ghosts of the past. Could a moment spent there unlock the potential to finally feel like more than just a subordinate? Before we continue, I need to tell you about something important that's happening. YouTube has been making changes to the system, and many people are losing notifications from channels they follow. If you're enjoying the content, click the bell and mark all notifications so you don't miss the next videos. And if you can leave a like, it really helps with reach. Seriously, it makes a difference. Oh, tell me in the comments where you're watching from. I'm always curious to know who's on the other side of the screen. Now let's continue. Clara took a deep breath and decided to climb the creaky stairs, a mixture of dread and anticipation pulsing through her veins. What was it she might discover? The air in the attic was thick, heavy with dust motes swirling in the dim light. There, her gaze fell upon a weathered chest pushed against the wall. Heart racing, she pried it open, revealing a collection of forgotten items, including a worn journal whose pages whispered tales long buried. As she read each entry, the words ignited an avalanche of emotions: grief, resilience, love, all too familiar yet portrayed through her late employer's voice. There, pinned under the anguish of another's pen, was a shared history of struggle that mirrored her own family's story. The ink bled with secrets and loneliness, yet spoke of overcoming adversity. Each turn of the page weighed heavily against her heart, revealing this connection threatened the already delicate fabric of their relationship. Clara's thoughts collided. Her heart longed to communicate these shared sentiments, yet fear of their reaction held her prisoner. Would they dismiss her for daring to claim that bond? Or worse, would they resent her for shining a light on truths they'd rather keep hidden? She buried her face in the journal, trembling in that attic filled with echoes. The cries, once chilling, began to feel like a clarion call, a demand for acknowledgement. But at what cost? The weight of the revelation suffocated her as she sat there, heart caught between loyalty and ambition. Tension soared, body rigid, unspoken truth threatened to unravel all she had. Clara faced a daunting choice: surrender her dreams for the sake of silence, or dare to ignite a conversation that could reshape everything. The heavy air crackled as she prepared to confront that reality, knowing that whatever lay ahead would alter her path entirely. Clara's fingers trembled against the delicate pages of the journal as she wrestled with the flood of conflicting emotions. The attic felt both like a sanctuary and a prison, imprisoning her under its dusty eaves, while offering a glimpse into a world of shared experience she had long craved. She inhaled deeply, the musty air mixing with her thoughts, each breath pulling her closer to a decision that could change everything. Her heart raced as she heard footsteps creaking on the staircase below. An irrational sense of urgency propelled her to tuck the journal back into the chest, a protective instinct rising like bile in her throat. She knew that revealing her connection to those hidden words could unravel the careful life she deconstructed over her decades of service. But the very act of hiding them had already begun to suffocate her. Rocking back and forth on her heels, she reflected on the life she led, one layered with honorable duty but void of self-definition. She had sacrificed so much in the name of loyalty. Clara yearned to unearth who she truly was beyond the confines of the Whitmans, yet fear and uncertainty gnawed at the edges of her resolve. What if speaking out turned their mundane acceptance into outright dismissal? The thought made her insides twist, but the journal, the poignant echoes of pain and triumph, wouldn't let her go. This fragile link to another's struggle spoke volumes about the universal themes of suffering and survival. Clara could either remain a mere shadow in the Whitman household or step forward into a light that might illuminate her complexities. Determination coursed through her veins, coaxing her to take a stand. Resolute, she descended the attic stairs, propelled by an unexpected sense of purpose that bubbled up from deep within. The cries she had heard earlier now resonated like echoes from both the past and future. Perhaps it was time to confront them, not as a servant lost in the corners of their home, but as a woman with a burgeoning voice. Back in the dusty corridors of the main house, her heart raced alongside the pounding of her footsteps. Each step was imbued with a new awareness of herself, as she passed the ornate pictures of the Whitmans' glorious moments frozen in time. She could no longer feign ignorance of her own story, nor could she continue to live without speaking her truth. She wouldn't allow their privilege to stifle what she had witnessed, learned, and felt. Upon reaching the kitchen, she found Mrs. Whitman brewing tea, her back turned. Clara hesitated, grappling with the overwhelming urge to speak. But instead of retreating, she took a deep breath. "Mrs. Whitman," she ventured, her voice barely above a whisper, "may I speak to you for a moment?" The words hung in the air like the scent of fresh tea, laced with hope and anxiety. Mrs. Whitman turned, her expression shifting from surprise to curiosity as she set the teapot down. "What is it, Clara?" Her tone was neutral, a small gap between them that felt monumental. Clara's mind raced. Here was the moment, the chance to unveil the connection she had discovered where the risk of vulnerability brushed against the promise of liberation. The pulse of her own heartbeat underscored the gravity of this conversation. It could serve as a portal to change her existence, to be recognized in her fullness. "There's something I found in the attic, something about our past," Clara said, her voice steadying as she approached the edge of that precarious cliff. Mrs. Whitman's brow furrowed, intrigue mingling with apprehension. "What do you mean?" she asked, now fully engaged. The invisible thread of tension pulled taut between them, pregnant with uncertainty. Clara took a breath, ready to leap into the unknown, ready to turn the key that could unlock hidden chambers of understanding. But what if revealing this truth changes everything? She thought, standing at the intersection of her aspirations and the weight of her reality. In that moment, Clara realized she was not just a maid but a bearer of her own story, a key player waiting to cast aside her role as a mere audience member in her life. As the silence deepened, Clara prepared to share not just the secrets of the journal, but the essence of who she had become. The moment to confront the past and illuminate the present had arrived. Little did she know that the echoes of her voice would transform the halls of the Whitman estate forever. Clara held her breath, the weight of Mrs. Whitman's gaze anchoring her in place. Each second stretched out, pressing against her chest like an unyielding weight. The kitchen felt smaller, the soft clinking of cups and the bubbling of tea swirling into a cacophony that drowned out her thoughts. "I found a journal," she finally said, the words escaping in a rush. They sounded almost foreign on her tongue, as if spoken by someone else. "It belonged to someone who used to work here, a maid before me. It's filled with her thoughts, her pain, and her experiences." Mrs. Whitman's expression shifted slightly, an imperceptible tautening of her features. "A maid?" Why would you go through old belongings? It was in the attic, Clara replied, a resolve swelling within her. And I needed to understand where I fit into this world. Mrs. Whitman hesitated, the kettle hissing angrily as steam began to billow from its spout. I think it's best if you leave old things undisturbed. They can bring up painful memories. The dismissal wrapped around Clara's heart like a vice. Was that true? But she knew she couldn't let this moment slip away, couldn't cower before her own desire for truth. I believe it's important to confront our pasts, don't you? To understand why we are who we are. The air thickened with tension. Clara could see Mrs. Whitman calculating her response, debating whether to engage or dismiss her entirely. But this was a moment of potential. It had to be. What if I told you that some of what is written resonates with my own struggles? That it reflects the very atmosphere we live in here? Clara pressed on, her voice rising with fervor. Clara, this household is a different reality, Mrs. Whitman cautioned, her tone now laced with a mixture of alarm and condescension. The wedge between them widened, but Clara didn't falter. In her mind, she replayed scenes from the journal, moments of shared humanity, of grief and resilience. But we're all human, aren't we? These feelings, they transcend our different lives. For an instant, Mrs. Whitman appeared vulnerable, the mask of authority slipping away like a cloak. Clara seized the opportunity, her thoughts racing to articulate her point. You may not see me as a peer, but I have a voice. I've lived this life too, and I deserve to acknowledge it just as much as anyone else in this house. The silence that followed held a weight Clara hadn't anticipated. It broadened her fear, swirling her doubts into the heart of her being. Yet within that silence, she felt something else, a flicker of power, a validation of her right to speak. Then, Mrs. Whitman spoke, her voice tempered but still carrying authority. You're treading precariously close to insubordination, Clara. The word cut deeply, twisting in her gut. Defiance mingled with hurt, as Clara recognized how easily their conversation could twist back into silence. But she was done retreating into the shadows of the house, done being unseen. I'm not trying to be insubordinate, she replied, her voice steadier now, infused with a quiet confidence. I'm trying to create a connection, to bridge the gap that history has forged between us. I want to honor that Maid's story, and perhaps in doing so, find my own. Recognition flickered in Mrs. Whitman's eyes, though her face remained inscrutable. Clara hoped she had ignited something. Maybe this would prompt a dialogue, an opportunity for reflection within the walls that had housed so many unacknowledged truths. As the kettle ceased its hissing, Mrs. Whitman considered Clara for a long moment, eyes narrowing just slightly. What do you propose, Clara? That we simply accept our intertwined fates? That we redefine our roles? The layers of their conversation thickened, and Clara could feel the stakes rising. She could either answer with caution or step fully into the confrontation that hummed in the air between them. As daring as it felt, she resisted the urge to back down. Yes, Clara replied boldly, perhaps we should start there. But first, I need you to hear my story. Mrs. Whitman's expression didn't waver, yet Clara sensed a shift and openness nestled beneath the tension. Taking a tentative step forward, she prepared to share the depths of her journey, emboldened by the words she had read in that journal. But, as Clara began to unveil her truth, a sudden noise echoed from the shadows of the house, a cry that shattered the fragile atmosphere they had built. The moment hung suspended, palpable with tension. Had her boldness invited consequences she had not anticipated? Clara's heart dropped, unable to discern whether she was prepared for whatever awaited her now. Would this interruption derail her efforts, or would it forge a new path within the chaos of the Whitman estate? Clara's breath hitched as the cry echoed again, a sharp sound tinged with distress that seemed to resonate through the very walls of the Whitman estate. It was a child's voice, raw and agitated, and it cut through the oppressive atmosphere like a knife. Mrs. Whitman immediately shifted her attention, her expression hardening once more as she moved toward the door leading out of the kitchen. "Stay here," she commanded tightly before disappearing into the hall. The air felt charged with unresolved tension. Clara stood frozen, torn between the impulse to follow and a deeper instinct which reminded her how far she had come, that this was an opportunity to wield her voice, to assert herself in the estate's hierarchy. She took a moment to breathe deeply, grounding herself in the chaos. The path her feet chose was her own. Instead of lingering in the shadow of the kitchen, Clara followed Mrs. Whitman even as a voice of caution nagged at her. Her heart raced, every step carrying the weight of both fear and determination. The thought that the child might need help propelled her forward, overriding the instinct to retreat into the background. As Clara turned the corner into the hallway, the noise transformed from cries to muffled sobs, and she quickened her pace. The sound led her to a room at the end of the hall where the door was slightly ajar. Inside, Clara glimpsed a disheveled figure, the child clenching a doll, chestnut curls falling across deeply furrowed brows. "Just leave me alone. I want my mother," the girl cried, each word like a jagged stone thrown against the walls of privilege that surrounded them. Mrs. Whitman was beside the girl, her expression fluctuating between annoyance and an attempt to console. "Sophia, darling, your mother will be back soon. You must be brave." But Clara sensed that this approach held little comfort. The realization birthed an unexpected surge of clarity within her. Here, in this moment of deep vulnerability, she recognized a shared humanity, a bond of suffering no economic status could sever. Stepping fully into the room, Clara interrupted. "She is scared," Clara said, her tone surprising even herself. "She needs to be heard, not just reassured." Mrs. Whitman's eyes flashed with irritation, but Clara didn't flinch. This girl was a part of the house, a reflection of the hidden stories trapped like echoes in the very walls around them. A bridge, perhaps, between two worlds. "Sophia," Clara knelt beside the child, watching as the girl's tear-stained cheeks glistened. "You can tell me what is wrong. I'm here to listen." It was a small gesture, but it felt monumental now that Clara had taken the step. Slowly, the trembling of Sophia's lips softened, her gaze darting from Mrs. Whitman to Clara, filled with a sense of curiosity mingled with desperation. I don't want to go to the party tonight," Sophia whispered, her voice barely above a breath, as if she feared the very admission might lead to her further banishment. "Nobody listens to me there." Clara's heart ached at the confession. In Sophia's fear, Clara could see reflections of her own struggles. "Then don't go. You can choose to stay here. Your feelings are important." Mrs. Whitman shifted uncomfortably, the authority in her posture strained by the child's vulnerability and Clara's assertiveness. "That's not how things work, Clara," she attempted, but the resolve in Clara's voice cracked through Mrs. Whitman's attempted dismissal. "It is how they should work," Clara countered, looking to Mrs. Whitman with conviction. "Every voice matters, no matter how small it seems." For the first time, Clara noticed a deepening complexity in Mrs. Whitman's expression, a mix of frustration and perhaps the hint of reflection, as she considered the truth of expressed feelings. For a moment, the room was suffused with a charged stillness, broken only by Sophia's tiny breaths. Clara felt a sense of connection, not just between her and the child, but lingering in the air as an invitation to something broader. Yet before she could explore this revelation fully, the door flung open. Suddenly, startling them as a robust figure entered Mr. Whitman, his brow furrowed in tension, eyes surveying the scene with a keen glare. "What is going on here?" he demanded, the authority in his voice slicing through the atmosphere, forcing each of them to flinch. Clara's heart raced, sensing the delicate balance had shifted dangerously. Would her newfound assertiveness crumble beneath the weight of his arrival? As she opened her mouth to respond, resolute within her heart, Uncertainty swirled around her like a storm. Had vulnerability simply paved the way to further scrutiny? Caught in that moment, Clara breathed deeper, her mind racing towards the strength she needed, not just for her, but for children like Sophia. She was on the precipice of a larger confrontation, one that could lead her deeper into the truth of this world or further into its shadows. The time had come to face not just the Whitmans, but the very system that kept them all bound to their roles. Clara braced herself for the answer she had not yet formulated, but which pulsed insistently inside her. A confrontation not just for survival, but for transformation. What would happen when she finally stood her ground? Clara could feel the tide of confrontation rising within her, pushing against her chest like a wave ready to crash. Mr. Whitman stood there, the embodiment of authority, but Clara refused to allow that authority to silence her. The moment hung thick in the air, alive with tension, and she understood now that silence would only reinforce the status quo which she had begun to question. "Mr. Whitman," she began, finding a steady voice that belied the tumult inside. "Sophia is afraid of what will happen tonight. She is expressing feelings that should be acknowledged, not dismissed." His gaze locked onto hers, sharp and challenging. "And what do you think your role is here, Clara? To take the child aside?" There was a measured disdain in his tone, each word dripping with condescension, but something in Clara shifted. She recognized a change within herself. This was no longer just about mere obedience or subservience. "I believe it's my responsibility to ensure she feels valued," Clara replied, the strength in her voice surprising herself. "We can't expect resilience from a child who feels voiceless." Sophia's gaze flickered curiously between the two adults, a silent witness to this unexpected clash, and Clara could sense the weight of the gaze grounding her, fueling her courage. Mr. Whitman's expression hardened, but Clara noticed a flicker of doubt pass over his features, a brief lapse in the armor that he wore. "This is a family matter, and I suggest you do not interfere." As those words settled in the air, Clara felt a surge of determination rising like a whisper of rebellion. There was something inherently unjust about the dismissal of human feelings in favor of appearances. Fear coiled around her, but it was intertwined with a newfound clarity. She had spent her life navigating the complexities of this world, often at the expense of her emotions. Perhaps now was the time to transform that understanding into action. "Mr. Whitman," Clara articulated, measuring each word, "there is no dignity in ignoring pain, in turning away from those who need us. Sophia needs our support right now, not just in order to be brave." A resounding quiet enveloped the room, the tremor of her voice hanging like a talisman against the tide of indifference. His brows furrowed deeply, and Clara sensed the internal conflict brewing within him. Was it confusion, frustration, possibly even something akin to respect? She dared to hope for a moment of reckoning. "I care about this family," he replied, his voice losing its edge, revealing a moment of vulnerability. "But children learn to cope through hardship. That's how I was raised." The admission lingered in the air, heavy with implications. "Perhaps it's time to redefine what we teach," Clara pushed, emboldened by the flicker of willingness in his response. "There is strength in comprehension rather than assumption. We can create a space for understanding, for all our sakes." As she said it, Clara felt a shift inside her, a door slightly ajar within the house of norms. She was articulating more than just her stance. She was challenging a systemic belief, encouraging growth rather than perpetuating cycles of silence. But Mr. Whitman's resilience returned, and his brow furrowed again. "What are you suggesting? That we all simply coddle feelings?" His tone was defensive, but Clara noticed a tension in his shoulders. The challenge hummed like a specter that needed to be answered. "No," she replied, her heart racing. "Real strength involves validation. It's the cornerstone of respect. Children like Sophia deserve that acknowledgement, and so do we." She could almost see the gears turning in his mind, and an unexpected rush of hope surged through her. It wasn't just about Sophia. This was about setting a precedent for compassion in a world so often filled with stark delineations of power. However, before a response settled, a sound intruded. The door creaked as Mrs. Whitman reappeared in the threshold, her expression fraught with confusion. The fragile moment of clarity hung precariously, the opposing forces in the room swirling like a tempest, each waiting for a decision that would shift the landscape of their lives irrevocably. Clara's pulse quickened. She was on the brink of something monumental, yet it felt as though the very air was thickening against her momentum. Would Mrs. Whitman's presence undermine everything she fought for? The stakes had never felt so high, and Clara realized she stood not just at a junction, but at the threshold of her identity. What lay ahead was unknown, but the embers of possibility began to ignite within her heart. The battle for voice, for authenticity, was unfolding before her very eyes. As Clara prepared to confront both Whitmans, she knew she would have to commit to a deeper unraveling of herself. Her greatest challenge had only just begun. Would this be a moment of awakening, or a clash of unyielding wills? The answer loomed, brimming with uncertainty, echoing in the stillness between them. Clara's heart raced as the weight of uncertainty swirled around her like a tempest. Mrs. Whitman's entry disrupted the tenuous equilibrium, yet it also solidified Clara's resolve. She felt an urge to confront the growing storm, not just for Sophia, but for the truth of her own voice, which had consistently been brushed aside. Mrs. Whitman looked between Clara and her husband, her brows furrowing in concern. "What is going on here?" she asked, her voice a mix of confusion and urgency. Clara seized the moment. "I need to speak openly," she said, attention fixed on Mrs. Whitman now. "Sophia is scared, and it's vital that we acknowledge her feelings, not just dismiss them as weakness." Mr. Whitman shifted uncomfortably at his wife's side, and Clara picked up on the subtle tremors that rippled through his posture. This was not a mere professional conflict anymore. It was a deeply personal confrontation that could change the very fabric of their lives. "I appreciate you looking out for our daughter," Mrs. Whitman replied, her expression softening slightly. "But what do you think we can do differently? She's been taught to cope." Clara felt the tension in the air, thick as fog, yet penetrating clarity began to emerge from within her. She was no longer just an employee in an old-fashioned household. She was a catalyst for change, a voice for the voiceless. This realization kindled a flame in her, illuminating thoughts she had wrestled with for years. "Teaching resilience does not mean we ignore fear," Clara said, her words flowing with newfound confidence. "Resilience is built on understanding and support. Sophia must feel safe to express her fears, or we risk silencing her forever." Mrs. Whitman's gaze softened further, yet Mr. Whitman's jaw tightened. "Being afraid is part of growing up," he interjected, a defensive edge returning to his tone. "I learned to face my fears without coddling." In an instant, Clara sensed the breadth of resistance converge on her, not just from Mr. Whitman, but reflecting societal norms buried deep in the fabric of family dynamics. "But what we label as coddling, that is often a form of nurturing," she argued. "A child has to know that it's okay to feel, and to voice those feelings. Isn't that essential to becoming a better adult?" Their stares remained locked, a silent battle emerging, a standoff where only one perspective could dominate. Clara felt the pulse of vulnerability you would feel when cornered, yet the fear transformed into determination. She had fought silently for too long. This conversation, this confrontation, was her moment for revelation. Mrs. Whitman's firm but warm presence began to bridge the fissure. "I want Sophia to grow into a caring person," she said quietly. "Maybe we haven't been doing enough in that respect." Clara watched a crease of contemplation form on Mr. Whitman's forehead. Each tick of the clock reverberated with the weight of inner conflict. She steeled herself and continued to press the point. "It starts here today. If we reinforce the idea that emotions are weak, we steal the strength of empathy and understanding. We owe it to Sophia to provide that framework. In that moment, Clara felt herself crossing the threshold into uncharted territory. She was no longer just challenging a man as police. She was asserting her own worth and vision that had been submerged for far too long. Sophia will not thrive in an atmosphere where her emotions are silenced, she continued, her voice steady. She deserves a champion, a space to fully express herself without fear of dismissal, especially when you both care so deeply for her. As Clara finished speaking, the air thickened with anticipation. Mr. Whitman's expression shifted, his rigid exterior cracking slightly, revealing uncertainty. Yet, just as hope began to unfurl in Clara's chest, Mrs. Whitman stepped forward, eyes reflecting concern mingled with determination. "Let us hear Sophia's voice tonight," she proposed slowly. "Let us not decide her fate without her input." Clara exhaled slowly, her spirit bolstered. This was a crack in the wall, a potential breakthrough. But as her mind raced through the ramifications of this decision, a shadow fell over the room as Mr. Whitman's face hardened again. "I never agreed to this," he warned, his voice stern, eyes cast downward. A palpable tension surged, and Clara's hope began to teeter on the edge. Would Clara finally find support in Mrs. Whitman, or would Mr. Whitman's unyielding demeanor reign supreme? Determinedly, Clara prepared for what came next. It was clear that the fight for understanding and acknowledgement of emotion was far from over. The stakes had never felt so real, catalyzing her pursuit for legitimacy. Would the evening unfold into a moment of solidarity, or plunge into an impasse where all voices remained muted? The silence hung heavily in the air, a taut string ready to snap under pressure. Clara's heart thundered as the reality of the Whitman household loomed over her, every moment stretching, crystallizing into something unchangeable. A choice lay within her grasp: confront Mr. Whitman more firmly, or retreat and let his oppressive silence swallow the conversation whole. "Mrs. Whitman, I understand your desire to foster independence in Sophia," Clara said, her voice steady but laced with urgency. "Independence should not come at the expense of understanding one's emotions. If we ignore her cries for help now, she may never feel safe expressing herself later in life." Mr. Whitman scoffed disdainfully, shaking his head as if Clara's words were mere noise. "And what do you propose, Clara? That we linger over her fears as though they are real-life threats? We need to instill strength, not a culture of dependence." Clara felt the heat radiate from Mr. Whitman's indignation, but instead of shrinking back, she squared her shoulders, allowing her convictions to fortify her resolve. She dared not let his dismissive attitude deter her from the cause she had taken up. "Strength does not come from ignoring vulnerability," she asserted, her eyes steely. "It comes from embracing our fears and learning how to navigate them. I know that firsthand." At this, Mrs. Whitman turned to Clara, with a flicker of interest breaking the tension on her face. "What do you mean by that? Have you experienced this struggle personally?" The unexpected question caught Clara off guard, but it was a timely opportunity. The words spilled out before she could stop them. "Yes. I grew up in a near-constant state of anxiety. I learned to hide my feelings, thinking it would make me stronger. It didn't. Instead, I found myself isolated, unable to communicate my needs. I was scared, just as Sophia is now." Mr. Whitman shifted again, irritation flashing across his face. "And you think your experiences entitle you to dictate the parenting of our child? You're a caregiver, not a therapist." The sting of his words cut through her, igniting old wounds. Yet, amid the discomfort, something within her began to transform. Clara felt the tendrils of doubt loosening their grip. She was more than just a caregiver. She was a voice for change, a proponent of empathy that mattered. "Just because I'm not a therapist doesn't mean I can't advocate for someone in need," Clara replied firmly, locking eyes with him. Surely, Sophia deserves more than the efficacy of outdated principles. The sharpness of her words hung in the air like a challenge. She could sense the internal struggle within Mr. Whitman, a crack in the stoic facade that defined him. He hesitated, a hint of uncertainty dancing at the corners of his mouth. Clara dared to hope that perhaps, just perhaps, he might reconsider. "I never had that choice," Clara pressed on, sensing the shift in energy. "I want to be the person Sophia can turn to when she feels small. If she can navigate her fears now, imagine the strength she'll cultivate for later." Clara's heart thudded, anticipation woven through her veins. The room felt charged with possibility, an almost tangible shift in momentum. Mrs. Whitman placed a hand on her husband's arm, a silent plea written in her gaze. I think we should give Clara her moment." Her voice held a mixture of compassion and firmness, and Clara felt a swell of gratitude for Mrs. Whitman's support. But before the moment could gather strength, Mr. Whitman withdrew his arm with a sharp breath. "You think my idea of parenting is flawed?" His voice rumbled with a quiet intensity, manifesting as a wall to shield his rising apprehension. "Not flawed, but perhaps lacking sensitivity," Clara replied, her breath catching. "Sophia deserves more than silence. She needs to feel heard, so that when the storm comes, she can find her own voice to weather it." As Mr. Whitman pondered her words, Clara sensed the pendulum swinging. She believed they were on the precipice of a breakthrough or, perhaps, a deeper rift. Nothing felt certain anymore. What truth would emerge from this night of revelations, and could Clara's voice finally secure a safe haven for Sophia? As she gazed into Mr. Whitman's faltering certainty, a ripple of both fear and resolve surged through her. There was everything to gain and everything to lose. Would the next words declared shatter the beliefs she fought against, or would they fortify a barrier she might never penetrate? The answer loomed close, and Clara braced herself for whatever might come. Clara's senses heightened, her pulse racing as she processed Mr. Whitman's reaction. The air thickened with unspoken tensions, a palpable challenge hanging between them. She caught Mrs. Whitman's gaze, a flicker of silent encouragement underscoring Clara's resolve. This was a moment that could redefine not just her role, but also reshape the parameters of what it meant to advocate for a child, especially in this household riddled with misunderstandings. "I know the gravity of my words may seem like a challenge to your authority," Clara began, her voice unwavering. "But my goal is not to undermine your parenting. It's to bridge a gap that could very well forge a stronger relationship with Sophia. Ignoring her emotional cries may teach her to bury them, but it won't extinguish them. They'll resurface undoubtedly, perhaps in more damaging ways." Mr. Whitman shifted in his seat. Clara could track the subtle changes in his demeanor, the flicker of consideration battling with ingrained skepticism. This could be the moment she not only nudged open the door to a dialogue, but also built a new foundation for Sophia's well-being. "I find value in your perspective," he finally said, almost begrudgingly. "But how can we apply your vision without sacrificing the principles we believe in? How can we do both?" Clara seized the opportunity, her mind racing with possibilities. She had never authored a playbook on parenting, yet, through her experiences, she instinctively understood the nuance required. It begins with openness. If we encourage Sophia to express herself, we instill in her an understanding of her own emotions. Beyond that, we can also model resilience. Let her know that vulnerability is not a weakness, but a springboard for growth. We can teach her to invite her fears in for coffee, so to speak. Mr. Whitman's frown softened somewhat, intrigued. It was as if Clara were planting seeds in his skepticism, slowly coaxing the fertile ground of compassion buried beneath layers of rigid conviction. "Fine," he said with a half-hearted smirk. "You have some interesting metaphors, Clara. But I still don't see how this will practically work." Clara suppressed a smile. Here lay the foundation to broaden not just their perspectives, but possible strategies for action. Perhaps we could implement small, structured sessions with Sophia, guided conversations where we focus solely on her feelings, enjoyable activities that encourage storytelling or art. In safe spaces, she could learn to navigate her emotions while still exploring her independence. What do you think? His brow furrowed as he weighed the idea. Her heart stretched painfully in both hope and doubt. Clara felt the weight of her entire journey in that moment, grappling with self-doubt, growing into the person who deserved a voice, and now fighting for the same chance for another. Mrs. Whitman's nod of approval seemed genuine this time, her soft agreement adding a momentum Clara desperately needed. That sounds promising. We can start small and see how things progress, Mrs. Whitman offered, a light of encouragement in her tone. But then, just as Clara felt the warmth of acceptance igniting in her chest, she saw Mr. Whitman's expression darken, a flicker of reluctance flashing in his eyes. And if it doesn't work? If she rejects all of it? What then? What if her emotions drive her deeper into that pit? The question hung, heavy with meaning. Clara's breath caught as she pondered the idea of failure, not just in the risk it posed for Sophia, but for her own fears of inadequacy resurfacing. It was a critical realization. The pathway to progress often bore the ominous shadow of self-doubt. Then we adjust, she replied steadily, forcing herself to look into Mr. Whitman's eyes once more. It may not be linear, but even in missteps, we learn. We adapt to what Sophia needs. I refuse to let one setback define her journey. The weight of her statement reverberated through the space. Clara felt herself teetering at the edge of a revelation, a deeper understanding of her own abilities solidifying within her. In that moment, she was the advocate she always aspired to be, not just for Sophia but for herself. She could carve paths where others saw walls. As they continued to discuss strategies, doubts in the room began to peel away, revealing glimpses of a joint commitment to grow. Yet, uncertainty still loomed over them. What would happen if they ventured too far too fast? Would Mr. Whitman retreat deeper into denial? Clara held onto her resolve, feeling an unyielding spirit surge within her. This was just the beginning. Her heart pulsed with anticipation, a prelude to pivotal choices that defined trajectories both for herself and for Sophia. Would they summon the courage to face deeper emotional truths in the weeks to come, or would Clara's breakthroughs devolve into challenges that plummeted deeper into despair? The tension lingered in the air, charged with the possibility of both triumph and turmoil ahead. Discussion deepened and swelled, the Whitman living room becoming an arena for transformative possibility. Clara's resolve, once fragile, now grew like a bastion against the tide of uncertainty. Each time Mr. Whitman raised a skepticism, Clara fortified her responses with determination steeped in professional experience. I believe we ought to recognize, she said evenly, that it's not just about what we fear may go wrong, but about the potential we're stifling by avoiding it. We shall forge ahead, using incremental steps to guide Sophia without overwhelming her. Each session can work as a barometer, redirecting our approach as necessary. Mr. Whitman considered this, and for the first time, Clara perceived a shift. His brows furrowed with contemplation rather than hostility. In that moment, his vulnerability resonated with her own. She recognized that they were both testing the waters of a new reality. Yes, we'll look foolish if it flops, he admitted, eyes narrowing slightly. But we may also look foolish if we keep pretending there's no issue at all. Perhaps it's time to embrace the discomfort instead. Clara's heart leapt at the unanticipated crack in his defenses. Exactly. The excitement spilled out, her words tumbling over one another in a rush. Sophia deserves to learn in an environment where emotion is a companion, not a stranger. By allowing her to express herself, we might actually teach her to own her narrative, her fears. Mrs. Whitman, often the silent observer, now leaned forward, intrigued. What kind of activities would you suggest? She sought clarity, her voice an earnest plea for actionable insight. Art, music, role-playing, Clara replied, her mind racing through the possibilities. Each of these mediums can become tools, turning abstract feelings into tangible expressions. We can guide her to narrate her experiences creatively. In doing so, we will beef up her emotional vocabulary, equipping her to articulate her needs effectively. Why not start this weekend? Mrs. Whitman suggested, a spark of enthusiasm lighting up her features. Shall we delve into it during family time? Clara relished the moment, absorbing the shift from doubt to willingness. With every beat of the conversation, her confidence swelled. Absolutely. We might want to keep the initial sessions lighthearted and engaging, so she doesn't feel pressured. And yet, beneath the fragile excitement, Clara wrestled with an undercurrent of fear. What if this strategy backfired? What if Mr. Whitman slipped back into his stubborn inclinations? Clara needed to ensure she remained vigilant, her guard up against despair that threatened to undermine every incremental gain. Replaying their discussion in her mind, Clara recognized her rapid evolution, no longer just an advocate, but a proactive collaborator. Indicative of her newfound purpose was her ability to adapt, to recalibrate under pressure. As twilight settled outside, a familiar thrill pulsed through her veins. She was pacing a once-content path paved with self-doubt, re-establishing the ground on which she stood professionally. Each conversation, every connection she fostered, was tending to a garden that promised growth. There may be challenges ahead, but I cannot shy away from potential, she thought, resolving to confront dark cores of anxiety lurking in her thoughts. The evening deepened, but an unsettling tremor shot through her. What would be the line between gentle support and smothering? Would they inadvertently fail to destroy the very support system they sought to build? Tensions began to stir in her mind, shadowing any celebratory thoughts. The stakes felt higher than ever. A determination fixed itself in her chest. This journey, laden with uncertainty, demanded bounds of emotionality Clara was only beginning to comprehend. Clara took a deep breath, readying herself for the path ahead, now fraught with potential both invigorating and threatening. What if a new twist awaited them, one that upended everything they'd built? Would an unexpected confession during their first session alter their newly forged alliance? Clara stood at the precipice of a new reality, a vibrant kaleidoscope of potential spreading before her. The time had come for the Whitman household to foster an environment that encouraged the free expression of emotions. Every conversation had been a stepping stone, guiding her from the shadows of obscurity into the light of recognition. Yet the lingering doubts continued to flicker in her mind, like faint embers beneath the surface. As the weekend approached, Clara learned that she and the Whitmans would host their first emotional engagement session with Sophia. The air pulsed with anticipation, and Clara felt more prepared than ever to pivot from being a mere caretaker to a valuable contributor to the family's dynamic. This was her moment, a chance to illuminate her own worth alongside that of the little girl who had ignited such fire within her. The day finally arrived, and Clara stood in the living room, vibrant decorations lining the space. Mr. Whitman entered, his demeanor still tentative, but undeniably open to the new approaches they had discussed. "So what is the plan for today?" he asked, scanning the room. Clara's heart raced, but confidence anchored her. "Today, we will start simple. We'll read a picture book together, one with themes of fear and bravery. Afterward, I'll encourage Sophia to draw how she feels about the characters." A hint of skepticism crossed Mr. Whitman's face, but curiosity etched itself deeper upon Mrs. Whitman's. Clara knew she was walking a fine line, but she was armed with the knowledge that real change often required not just risk but also vulnerability. Sophia appeared, her eyes darting between her parents and Clara, curiosity tinged with hesitation. Clara knelt to Sophia's level. "Hey, Sophie! We're going to have some fun today. We'll learn how to use words and pictures to show our feelings. Think you can help us?" A soft smile crept onto Sophia's face, and Clara felt her heart expand. This was hope encapsulated in a childless innocence. The reading commenced, each page revealing characters battling their emotions. Clara noticed Sophia's focus shift, her expressions mirroring the characters' journeys. It was clear the young girl was invested. This marked the first step towards catharsis. After the story ended, Clara gently prompted, "What do you think the characters felt? And what about you, Sophia?" Drawing on the feelings that had previously gone unacknowledged, Sophia slowly began to articulate her thoughts. They were scared, but they also found friends to help them. Clara sensed something profound unfolding. "Exactly. Just like you have us." With subtle nudges, Clara encouraged Sophia to express her own fears openly, while Mr. and Mrs. Whitman watched, slowly reflecting vulnerability in their eyes. As commented thoughts intertwined, moments of laughter intertwined with snippets of seriousness emerged. Clara reveled in each passing minute, witnessing transformation in not just Sophia, but also in the Whitmans. Conversations flowed, vulnerabilities surfaced, and connections strengthened. The pivotal moment arrived when Clara offered art supplies post-discussion. The metaphorical ball rolled into action, as Mr. Whitman unexpectedly picked up a crayon, expressing his own thoughts. "I feel overwhelmed," he admitted, eyes drawn on the colorful page. "This feels foreign, but I want to learn." Clara's heart swelled. This moment was an undeniable breakthrough for both father and daughter, representing a collective step toward emotional literacy and understanding. After the session, Clara felt a solid confidence emanate from within. She had not only accomplished her mission but proved her competence as an invaluable member of the Whitman household. Days turned into weeks, and Clara forged ahead, engaging in regular sessions with Sophia that fostered open dialogues. She learned to value her voice beyond the label of Maid, weaving threads of respect and authenticity into the very fabric of their lives. The shadows that once danced between her and the Whitman family began to evaporate, replaced by an unbreakable connection. Recognized and respected, Clara's identity transformed through this journey. She emerged not just as a caretaker, but as a champion for emotional openness, a beacon of validation. As her professional life flourished, Clara stood proud. She had achieved the recognition she once sought. She no longer felt like a mere accessory in their extravagant lives, but a vibrant participant creating a legacy of shared strength. In that newly founded balance of emotions and understanding, Clara felt fulfillment wash over her. She had conquered not only the narrative of inferiority imposed upon her, but had proved that every voice mattered, that courage could emerge from vulnerability, reshaping lives forever. Now, with a solid foundation resting on emotional truths, Clara looked toward the future, buoyed by a newfound empowerment that would guide her next steps. No longer just a maid, but a transformative force within the Whitman estate. This was her triumphant achievement, crafting a legacy not just for herself, but for every voice waiting to be heard. It was a moment deserving of recognition, a resonance that could echo for years to come. Don't wait another second. If Clara's journey touched you, you need to subscribe now to not miss the next exclusive emotional stories. Leave a like now to feed the algorithm, and ensure that more souls get to see this transformative tale. We want to hear your thoughts. Comment below your reactions and theories about this ending. Share this powerful journey with at least 5 friends who need to witness Clara's remarkable transformation. Let us spread the word.